It is time for us to hit social media in our hashtag segment. For that, we'd like to welcome in Megan Brantley, the VP of Research at LikeFolio.com. Good morning to you, Megan. And also we got fast market contributor Jenny Horn with us as well. Let's talk some fear, some coronavirus, and how the two go together.
Everything that's kind of creating volatility in these markets today. And I like that you just mentioned airlines, because Larry Kudlow came out this morning and said they're considering targeting measures to offset the negative impact of the coronavirus. And this gave hotels, airlines, cruise lines, the casinos, the OTAs,
They all jumped.
They all jumped. They've kind of fallen off since then. As I walked in here, I was looking at hotels, which are now trading lower on the day. But they did get that initial pop, which is, of course, a good thing, because the tourism stocks have just been beat up lately. And it's just like every day it feels like there's new 52-week lows and there's more headwinds for these companies. But I mean, the coronavirus, the United States is doing their preventative measures. I mean, Trump signed that $8.3 billion aid plan today, which is, of course, a good thing. And it seems like people are really trying I mean, the whole world is trying to kind of stop the spreading of the coronavirus. But the fear is still there. I mean, you go on Twitter this morning and it seems like it's all anyone can talk about. So that goes into my first tweet, which says, coronavirus cases reported 96,782. People recovered 53,975. Number of deaths 3,008. Percentage of deaths is 3.24%, and that recovery is 96.58%. Media must not spread fear-mongering and panic, but provide necessary information to help curb this virus. So Megan, you all have this piece of data that I think is really interesting, and that's the fear index, which we talked about a week ago. So if you look at your fear index, of course, there's different spikes with all these different kind of epidemics. How does this spike compare to the other spikes we see in your chart? Because, I mean, I have to think historically SARS saw something pretty similar.
You know, whenever we look at this fear index, this is really a pulse on investor sentiment. So mentions like the market looks terrible or the S&P is going down, things like that is what we're capturing. And what you can see right here is actually that spike in 2018 was the highest spike that we have on record. I think this was the single largest point drop that the market had seen. And so that now is semi-comparable, but we're also seeing a bit of a peak. I think that in the last week, the highest spike on our fear index was on Friday, and this week it's still elevated and it's still raised, but it's starting to peak off. So we're watching that. We'll definitely watch as the fear of this virus is obviously on the minds of investors.
Megan, we need your help today, Megan. We need you to help us come out from under our desk and start looking at the markets again without fear. I know this is a fear index, but and it looks like it's at recent highs or extremely high for the history of this. But
yes.
But let's stay positive. Let's try to stay positive here, okay? What do you see in terms of when you see fear go up? How long does it stay up? Give us some type of not only range, but duration as well. Do you guys have anything like that available?
You know, this is a pretty unique scenario. I think that you can see whenever the market downturned at the end of 2018, that was a longer duration. You see kind of that sustained fear increase. Right now, I think that's still an unknown. You know, whenever Jenny asked about SARS and MERS prior, they did not seem to register the level of spike that we're registering on the fear index right now. And who's to say, how things develop? One thing that we're tracking specifically are coronavirus mentions as well. And so this chart that you're looking at, these are just mentions of regular people talking about the coronavirus. And you can imagine a lot of these mentions are pretty politically slanted. People love, or all of a sudden now, experts on the coronavirus and science and everything behind it. And they love to talk about it. But you can see it's obviously on the minds of consumers. And so this is something that I think is driving that fear index spike as well. So this is something we'll watch to see, are we going to continue to sustain these levels of all-time high, or, are things going to start to level off and then subside?
Yeah, Megan, I like that you mentioned how everyone is now an expert, because that's exactly what I saw. It's so funny. You have to kind of just shift through the noise because there is so much out there, and now everybody, of course, has an opinion on something that's becoming so widespread. But another thing I saw on Twitter is, of course, the conversation of travel. And it seems like with this coronavirus, travel is obviously a headwind. If you just look at the airline stocks alone, that paints enough of a picture. But that goes into my next tweet that says, thanks to the coronavirus, I just booked a flight to Florida for $80, including taxes and fees. And this is not to of course, undermine the fact that many people globally are fighting this virus and it's very serious. But Megan, when it comes to travel, I have to think that because people are canceling, flights are cheaper, and just in general, no one wants to travel right now, correct?
Yeah, we're seeing, especially when we look at the, what's driving those coronavirus mentions, we're starting to see an uptick in travel mentions. I think a lot of companies have come out and updated their travel policies. They're allowing employees to work from home, and just in general mentions of people canceling these trips and, attending conferences. It's starting to increase and uptick. I think that, the last 2 days were the highest levels that we've recorded. This is building, obviously, and in line with the move that companies and people are making to kind of contain this. So I think that, this is something we'll watch moving forward. And we're also going to take a look at, okay, so now that people aren't traveling, what are companies doing instead of this, right? Instead of spending money on conferences and things of that nature, where are they going to shift their assets, and where are consumers going to shift their assets? Instead of going on a cruise, what are they going to do? So this kind of presents an opportunity for investors and an opportunity for us to listen to what the consumer is acting on.
And I'm glad you mentioned opportunity, because that's kind of how I was going to ask you, kind of looking at all this information. Obviously, if we look at the cancellation of these trips, it's reflected in the airlines to some extent. If you flip that chart around, it looks a lot like American Airlines chart in terms of the stock selling off quite a bit in the last few months. But if we're looking at the coronavirus mentions and how that's grown and staying sustained, as well as the fear index, how does LikeFolio look at that information? Is that a contrarian indicator? Is that a message to you guys that this is maybe going to be a bigger issue right now than we think it is? Or how do you guys dissect that data and when you're making your decisions in terms of investments and trades at this time period?
So we're really watching to see if those mentions sustain, and also I think both indexes are really important to look alongside each other. Our consumers, the more that they talk about the coronavirus, is it continuing to weigh on the minds of investors? Right now we're seeing both are at very elevated levels, so that seems to be a driving fear for both parties, just regular consumers and investors. But I think moving forward, we'll start to look to see where are different companies that we track, where is that needle being moved? Costco was a great example of when we saw an increased surge in consumer demand actually move the needle for a company. I think Clorox is another example. You can imagine one of our top trending tags right now. And so there are other companies at play here that could stand to benefit or really suffer from this. And so we'll start to watch to see, what effects are these topics, these big trends on people's minds. How is it actually impacting the way a consumer interacts with a business?
Yeah, Megan, just so you know, I offered to do the show live from my family room, but Jenny Horn said no, she wouldn't do it. Apparently, the suburbs of Chicago are not the same, so Jenny Horn didn't want to do the show live from my family room and the work from home theory that we were talking about. So, yeah. Jenny, it's Jenny's fault.
The work from home theory is a little bit difficult for us.
Yeah, no, work from home, yes. Work from Kevin's home, not so much.
Yeah, that too.
Megan, one final question with this coronavirus mention count, because obviously you track all types of different topics, whether it's something like this virus or just a fad and a trend in clothing or whatever it may be. Where does this rank in terms of the amount of people talking about anything versus other stuff that you've tracked in the past?
That's a really good question. From a growth rate perspective, I mean, this is absolutely explosive. When you look at the mention volume on the side there, 300,000 mentions a day. That's really, really substantial. So this is obviously something that people are talking about and that people really care about. So I would say this is of a very high importance. Whenever we look at, we track like diet trends and things of that nature, we're not looking at this type of volume. So I think that, it is important. It's definitely on the minds of consumers and investors, and it's just, it's important to watch moving forward to see how this changes and to see, is this going to continue to grow, or is it going to start to level off and fears subside a bit?
Yeah, and then I think we'll have to check in maybe next Friday and then see where things are shaping up at that point. But we checked on it last week, and it doesn't look like things have given back any of these gains at all in terms of these mention counts. So we'll see how it develops over the next week and over the weekend. But thanks to Megan. Have a great weekend, Megan, and thanks to Jenny as well.